Welcome to this episode of Vote Like a Texan. I am excited to be talking to my friend Ricky Gleason. And Ricky has decided to run for Kendall County Judge. And I'm a believer that the judge, the court, the commissioner's court in Texas is a very important election locally. It's an election that has impact on budget, on decisions, and really the judge serves as the CEO of a county in Texas. So, Ricky, thank you for making that commitment, but welcome to the show.
Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it, buddy. Glad to be here.
So, how did you decide that you wanted to run for office?
Well, it's something that's been on my heart for a long time. My wife and I have been married about 11 years now, a little over 11 years. And for a good decade of that, most of it, I've told her that I want to run somewhere in the county. I've always felt called to serve in that way. The community that raised both of us, Justin. I mean, it's an amazing place and it deserves excellent leadership. So for about a decade, the answer was no. And then I had some friends approach me and I'd been thinking about running for this judgeship. And um, I told my wife about 8 months ago, I guess now, maybe nine. Hey, let's pray about this separately and figure it out. And she texted me one morning about 4 months ago and was like, "Hey, I really feel God's calling you to this and telling me to be obedient and follow your lead." And I said, "Yes, ma'am, let's go." And we hit the ground running. So that's where we're at. And it's really just about bringing service back to our community.
Well, it's an important conversation that you're having, though, because it is a family decision to make this commitment. It is a lot of campaigning, and you'll be campaigning, I assume, through the primaries into the runoff in May and into November when you finally have the final election. Am I understanding that right for the county roles?
Yes, absolutely. It's a lot like any other partisan role where you're going to be running all the way through the primaries. We'll get through that and then get to November and be elected to office and start the job January of 27. Very exciting.
So, one of the things that I think about when somebody goes into a role, particularly the judge role, there's a learning curve on so many elements because all of a sudden you're in charge of a several $100 million budget, I have to assume, when we think of the amount that road and infrastructure cost. When you think about how counties are funded across Texas, you have budget responsibilities to the state, to federal funding, et cetera. How do you prepare and what are your thoughts on that learning curve coming into an office like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's like any job, right? There's going to be some sort of training capabilities out there. I know that there's a lot of roles, or I'm sorry, a lot of classes out there that you end up going to, not only just to learn how to be on the county commissioner's court, but running a company is something that, is kind of in my blood. That's where I'm at. So I do a lot of business consulting, as you know, and as in my role as a financial planner, financial advisor, we do a lot of this budgeting and helping folks walk through their planning process and making sure that they can be successful in the future. So there will be some learning curves, and it's not quite in those hundreds of millions here in Kendall County. It's about half that 100 million mark. So, but still a very large budget, a big, kind of middle market company, if you will. And so there's a lot of responsibilities to the employees and to the citizenry of Kendall County.
Now, you've served part of Kendall County in the past, I think, on boards and other public roles. Can you talk about that? Because I think it's important because that's in a city capacity. We're talking about a county capacity. Those have to work in harmony. And I think you've had exposure in both and the schools and a couple other things. But how have you served the public in Kendall County in the past?
Just like I said, Justin, I've served on multiple nonprofit boards trying to give back to a lot, mostly first responder boards that have been on. Especially back when our first responders were under attack so much. I remember the riots in Austin and all the craziness going on around our country, and really doubled down my efforts on how we serve our police, our EMS, our fire, and working through that. Now, in that city capacity, you're right. I'd served 2 terms on the Planning and Zoning Commission here in Bernie, which is an interesting job because it's there's a lot going on, but you really don't have a lot of authority in that. But you get to learn a ton. about how these municipal codes work, and working with the public on variances and explanations of education on how that code actually works in real world scenarios. So I loved it because it really spoke to the way that I like to do things, which is serving people, but also being able to be collaborative and creative to help people really to realize that dream that they set forth when they started that process. It, it does translate over a little bit, but county government's a little bit different. Obviously, there's a lot of similarities in the way things function, but a lot less authority, obviously, in the county.
Well, I think that's an interesting point that you bring up because a city has a master plan and a city manager and a lot of guiding principles. One of the things I'm very proud of the city of Bernie for is their ethics standard for people that serve on planning and zoning and other volunteer boards because you do get exposed to a lot. And then you have to know what you can say, how you can appropriately make decisions. And so it is part of that learning curve of coming into public office. Having served on those volunteer boards, it sets the tone. And I think city of Bernie and Ben Thatcher and the work that he's done there is really set our code of ethics for volunteers very clearly and cleanly. That all comes back to a master plan and to your point, the authority a city has versus the county where you have less authority. But my personal belief is that a county needs a strategic vision and some sort of guiding document. It can't be a master plan, but there has to be a collaborative spirit between agencies at the county level and then the cities that the county serves because interlocal agreements and interlocal negotiations become critical when you think of fire and safety and policing. All of those things interconnect. And I'm excited to see how those two entities can operate together.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a big part of what we're talking about on our campaign is that collaborative leadership, right? I see a lack of that across a lot of the different entities within our community. And it's something that we need to fix, and we need to figure out how to do that. And not only with our cities, but with all those nonprofits that are out there that are doing amazing work to help, everyone from our elderly to our youngest, right? I mean, there are amazing folks in this county as well. I think that's one of our greatest resources is all the knowledge base that we have here. I get to meet a lot of people, and through this, I get to meet a whole lot more people that I may have never gotten to meet, which has been a lot of fun. But I realize more than ever that we have some of the greatest resources of people that there are in the country. And so, how do we bring everybody together, work together, treat people with respect and kindness they deserve, and serve the community? And that is paramount. I do think that a lot of time county governments and city governments they tend to silo themselves a little bit and forget that we're all working for the same people, and we're working for the betterment of their life, and not the ability to rule over them in any way, shape, or form. And you did point that out. Ben Thatcher is a good example. I've had some talks with Ben, great guy, truly feel that he wants to serve people. And that's, I think, the number one thing that you have to have if you're going to be in a governmental role of some kind, especially when you're talking about the highest office in the county as a judge. It's about taking care of people and helping them to realize their dream to the best of their ability.
It's creating that environment for success when you can create a place where they can bring their business, grow their business, when they can meet their family goals, they can use their private property the way that they see fit, but within respect of the boundaries set by the whole community. It's an interesting place to go. We have a really special place in Kendall County, and I'm reminded that we have 39 miles of the Guadalupe River that run through that. And we were reminded this summer about the importance of emergency management response. And we were very fortunate relative to our neighboring Kerr County. Um, but it's a testament to the readiness of those environmental safety programs to ensure that we can manage the people, the weather, the things that happen, um, especially out in the northern parts of Kendall County where we're seeing growth. But we haven't necessarily seen the follow on of the volunteer firefighters that we still have. I mean, that is a reality in our county, and they have needs, they have equipment, and they have personnel. That's a big role in my mind for the county judge to think about how do we think about fire safety in the Texas Hill Country in small unincorporated towns, Sisterdale, Candelia, Comfort, all run by volunteer fire. So I just think that's one aspect of what you're going to have to think about as you go through the campaign. And for whoever wins the judgeship, I hope it's a priority that we can think about that natural disaster that is wildfire, flooding, et cetera, that are our concerns in Kendall County.
You're right, Justin. It's a big part of a lot of the conversations we've been having. And it comes down to, as a financial planner, I'm a big fan of if you don't have a plan, you're planning to fail. And right now, we do have some emergency management plans in place. We do have different things like that. You hit on, our volunteer fire. I mean, volunteer firefighters are such an amazing thing, right? Because it's that neighbor helping neighbor, which is a very Texas thing, which is what we watched our community do. I mean, come together and create. We didn't have anybody pass away here in our county, thank God. But obviously, Kerr County got hit very hard, and a lot of that ended up here in Kendall County. But our people came together and built staging grounds and places to bring kind of the triage. It's always behind those enemy lines, right? If you will, if you want to use the military spot for it. But I think the Comfort Area Foundation and a lot of those folks out there just did such an amazing job of bringing people together, working on the supply lines and getting everything out there. So our community is such a big part of that is neighbors helping neighbors. And I love that about Kendall County. It's always been that way. It's incredible. The Hill Country in general, it's always been that way. And you hit another interesting point there with, we have 39 miles of the Guadalupe River there, and we live in one of the worst flash flood places in the country, arguably on the planet. I mean, it's kind of crazy. I mean, you grew up in the area too, so all the flooding and flash floods are just a part of life, it seems. But we definitely have to start taking it to a different level. There are plenty of plans out there. I'm working on flood control and different ways of doing that. And there's a lot of people and out there that are a lot smarter than me. I'm a big fan of not being the smartest guy in the room. I want to have a bunch of smart people around me. And as you mentioned, the CEO role is really getting those smart folks to give you information so you can be that decision maker in the room. They're all experts in their field, and your job is to get creative and figure it out. So I would have a goal. You talked about fire, you're talking about the flood stuff and all that emergency management, of putting together different committees of those folks and working towards that planning and being very strategic about it and very mindful about the way we do it. And that works back into another aspect of having a true strategic long-term plan for the county. And like you said, it doesn't mean that is like you have to do exactly what this says, but it's a vision. And we need those visions, we need those values, and we need goals that we're trying to accomplish at the county so that not only the citizens of the county know where we're going and what we're doing and can hold us accountable to that, but also the employees and department heads and all the way down to the very last guy and gal that work there at the county have a shared vision, a shared value, and a shared goal that they know we're working towards every day. Very important.
It's important, and there's an opportunity across the state in many counties for that conversation to evolve. And it's important because, particularly for Kendall County, because we are experiencing Texas Triangle growth, and we're out on the far edge of the Texas Triangle, but we're also in a community that's short on water, that loves the heritage and doesn't want to see fields turn into big box stores. You know, there's a hard compromise somewhere in there for everyone because the growth is coming.
It's here. I mean,
But a good vision helps manage that growth. And I'd be curious, how do you see that growth happening up I-10 and through Kendall County? Um, we don't have to talk about projects, but just in general, that growth is a scary thing for a lot of voters.
Yeah, and this is something obviously comes up a lot here. It comes up a lot in the entire state, right? Because I don't know that there's any quarter of the state that hasn't been untouched by some sort of growth, which is a good thing, Justin. I mean, I remember as a little kid, Bernie not really, it was starting to close down. There was some boarded up stores in the late '80s. There was a lot going on that seemed like, hey, you got to get out of this town to be somebody. And what a turnaround that's become. So there's a lot of good with the bad, that pressure of growth and infrastructure, which again is another strategic planning opportunity. We have a plan, but are we utilizing that? Is it still up to date based on what's going on? And then as far as the growth thing goes, a lot of people are like, you got to be pro growth or anti growth. And I'm like, I'm neither one of those. Let's just be realist about things and look at the fact that we're going to grow. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But when we don't have a plan, then it's just chaos because when you start to develop those plans out, people realize where that vision is going. And so you start to help be mindful about where things are going. I, I don't love the fact that, a lot of the fields that I used to love driving by are now businesses or subdivisions and all of that. But it's property rights in the end. And that's something that is one of the most Texas things you can talk about, right? I mean, we love our property rights here, and so we need to bring those property rights back to our people. I feel like our county, good, bad, or indifferent about it, has really tried hard to regulate the growth rather than to figure out how to be mindful through that process. And so we really just have to try to guide it to the best of our ability. But these text dot roads, they're expanding. We don't really have any control over that. The best we can do is to work with TxDOT to make sure that we're getting the things we need alongside of that growth for our infrastructure. And so repairing that relationship, I think, for growing counties, especially as close as we are to San Antonio, is going to be a big deal to be able to work with them and help guide them towards those places we see it happening. But the problem is too with that, like when we expand roads, we just create new choke points. And so how do we build other arterials or small little cut throughs that will help to, relieve some of that traffic issue that we're seeing, especially here in the Bernie end of the county?
Well, and those are 10-year decisions, right? And you have to be looking out. You have to in this planning cycle, you have to be thinking 10, 20 years with TxDOT. And unfortunately, I think we've grown faster than that cycle, and
Yes.
it's going to take a lot to bring it back to normal. It's going to take big investments. It's going to take some hard decisioning. But we're both Bernie High School graduates that have boomeranged back to our community. And I think that's a testament to how many great, talented kids we're producing in our school system that we export that don't come back to Bernie. And that means family land gets sold. That means family businesses get sold. It does change the fabric of our community when a lot of new people come in and the people who have been here are leaving. So I'm a big proponent on boomerang back to your hometown where you can and be part of building a future that's good for your kids, my kids, ensuring that there is opportunity. And we can do that around the water conversation. We can do that around the growth conversation. But we can do it best when we're looking at what are we doing for our kids, our grandkids, and really setting up the next 50 years of opportunity to keep the hill country a great place to live.
Yeah, and that's what planning is all about, right? Is how do we continue to respect our heritage, our culture, the beauty of our wonderful county. I mean, of the entire hill country. And to that point, how do we protect water for our current folks, plus those who are coming? I mean, we know there's plenty of developments coming, and so I think that's again collaborating with our neighbors, Kerr County, Gillespie, Bandera, to what extent we can collaborate with Bear County and working on all that because water doesn't care about county lines.
No.
It's all tied together. So if somebody in Kerr is doing something different, and that's going to affect Kendall. And so we definitely have to take a more proactive approach with partnering and doing those intergovernmental agreements with other counties around us. Plus, if we want to make change, real change to water infrastructure and things, we're going to need our neighbors to help out because one county streaming into the state void is pretty hard, is pretty easy to ignore. But when you get a group of counties talking about issues together, that's where you start to draw attention. And that's where we can really collaborate to make things better for the future.
There's 15 to 18 hill country counties, depending on how you look at it, and they are all incredible gems in Texas. And when they work together, they can really move the needle. So I'm encouraged to hear you talk about a regional approach for infrastructure and investment. Ricky, I know this is a busy season for you. I appreciate the time and the effort that you and your family are going through to run for this office. Where can people find you and what do you want them to hear as we close out our conversation?
Man, I think the main thing I want everybody to hear is primary day is March 3rd. Early voting starts February 23rd. And if you're not voting in the primary, unfortunately, it's like one of the lowest turnouts in a lot of the elections. And you are losing your choices. By the time we get to November, the choice has already been made for you if you're not voting in the primary. So I would just encourage everybody to get out and vote February 23rd. March 3rd is election day. We got to get that done. And I would encourage, our generation, it's time to get involved. It's time for you to get out there and do that. And if you don't, again, you're losing your options and your choices. You can find a lot more information about our campaign, obviously on Facebook at Ricky Gleason for Kendall County Judge, and then on our website, which is rickygleason.com. RICKY. No I.
Well, Ricky, I so appreciate the time, the conversation, and applaud the energy going into it. It is a big role to run for any office, but in particular the judgeship. So thank you for doing it and have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too, Justin. Thank you for your time, brother. Enjoy the day.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Vote Like a Texan. Please remember to like and subscribe and check out votelikeatexan.com.